everyone, and welcome to this deep dive where we're going to be looking at some seriously fresh news.
Hot off the press?
Yeah, hot off the press.
Literally.
It's all about President Trump's executive orders and how they're shaking up the federal workforce.
Big time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
These articles were literally published just hours ago, so we're talking insights from January 22nd, 2025.
Wow.
I know.
That's today.
So buckle up, because we're going to be covering who is being impacted the most, what reasons are being given, and what this could all mean down the road. You might be surprised by how fast things are changing.
Yeah, it's incredible, the speed of these changes.
Right.
It's remarkable. We're not looking at a gradual shift here.
No.
It's immediate restructuring.
Right. So Trump is saying he wants to shrink the government. He's calling it efficiency improvements and attrition.
Yeah.
But haven't we heard this smaller government talk before?
Right.
What makes this time different, and will it actually work?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? I mean, historically, these kinds of initiatives have had mixed results.
Yeah.
Some argue that they streamline processes and reduce waste, while others say that they can undermine essential services
Right.
and hurt the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
It really depends on how it's implemented and which programs are targeted. And that's where the controversy begins.
Okay.
Unions and critics are saying this isn't about efficiency at all.
Right.
It's a political move to target specific groups and undo a lot of what the Biden administration put in place.
Wow. And it seems like some groups are feeling the heat more than others right now.
Absolutely.
We're talking about those working in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, the DEIA roles, and folks who were recently hired. It's a big chunk of the federal workforce.
Huge.
Can you tell us more about what's happening with the DEIA employees?
So the situation is pretty dramatic. Effective immediately, all federal employees in DEIA roles are on paid administrative leave.
Okay.
By the end of the month, agencies are required to submit plans for their formal dismissal. It's not just the employees either.
Okay.
All DEIA offices and programs are being shut down entirely. Websites, social media, the whole 9 yards.
That's a bold move. One article quoted an AFGE spokesperson, Andrew Huddleston, saying that the DEIA order is clearly meant to initiate a reduction in force among those folks. They are very at risk. Do you think he's right?
It's hard to say definitively, but the optics certainly raise questions.
Yeah.
If efficiency is the goal,
Right.
why target these specific programs and personnel so aggressively? It's worth noting that these programs were put in place to address systemic inequalities and promote fairness.
Right.
Dismantling them raises concerns about a potential return to discriminatory practices within the government.
Makes you wonder what the underlying motivation is.
Right.
And as if that wasn't enough, new hires are also being scrutinized.
Oh, yeah.
What's the situation there?
So agencies are reviewing all new hires who are still in their probationary periods, meaning they haven't reached a year or two on the job. Some might be kept, but it seems many could be let go. On top of that, job offers that were made before Trump's inauguration, but with start dates after February 8th, are being rescinded.
Wow.
The memo from the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Personnel Management stated that agencies should promptly determine whether those employees should be retained at the agency. Those whose jobs are being eliminated or restructured can be placed on administrative leave.
So even if you were offered a job, it might not be there waiting for you.
Exactly.
That's unsettling. It feels like the rug is being pulled out from under these people.
Absolutely. It's a very abrupt change.
Yeah.
And it creates a sense of uncertainty for those entering or hoping to enter the federal workforce.
Right.
And this brings us to another area being targeted, the IRS.
The IRS? Hold on. Are we talking about getting rid of the IRS altogether?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
But there's definitely a push to dramatically reshape the agency. Elon Musk, who's now head of the Department of Government Efficiency, has been vocal about wanting to simplify the tax code and essentially eliminate the IRS altogether.
And Trump seems to be on board with that.
There are signs pointing in that direction. Even when the general hiring freeze is lifted for other agencies, it will remain in effect for the IRS. Plus, Trump's nominee for IRS Commissioner Billy Long actually voted to abolish the agency entirely in the past.
Wow. This is big. What do you think the implications would be if they actually managed to pull that off?
It would be a massive shift in how the government operates.
Yeah.
The IRS plays a crucial role in collecting taxes and funding government programs.
Right.
Eliminating it would have far-reaching consequences, and it's unclear what would replace it.
Yeah.
Some argue it's a necessary step to reduce government overreach, while others fear it would lead to widespread tax evasion and a decline in essential services.
It seems like this is just the tip of the iceberg. Are there other areas beyond DEI and the IRS that are being impacted by these executive orders?
You're right, it's not just about DEI and the IRS.
Okay.
There's another significant area where Trump is making waves. The debate around gender and sex.
Yeah.
He just issued an executive order defining sex as solely male and female,
Yeah.
not changeable, and not the same as gender identity.
Yeah, I was just getting to that. It seems directly tied to his campaign promises and his strong stance against what he called radical gender ideology. What are your thoughts on this? What could be the impact of this definition?
It's a move that's certain to generate strong reactions from both sides.
For sure.
While the order focuses on the legal definition,
Right.
there are concerns about the potential negative impact this could have on individuals with diverse gender identities, particularly when it comes to healthcare and access to services.
So while the administration might frame this as a return to traditional values, it could have real consequences for those who don't fit neatly into those categories.
Absolutely.
And how are people reacting to all of this? The unions must be furious.
You're absolutely right. There's been strong pushback. Unions and critics are calling these actions politically motivated and harmful to the foundation of a merit-based civil service system.
Yeah.
The AFGE president, Everett Kelly, had a particularly strong statement saying, "Make no mistake, this action is not about making the federal government run more efficiently, but rather is about sowing chaos and targeting a group of patriotic Americans that President Trump openly calls crooked and dishonest."
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
So we've got DEI programs being dismantled, new hires in limbo, the IRS potentially on the chopping block, and a new definition of sex that's causing a lot of controversy. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What should our listener be paying attention to as this story continues to unfold?
I think it's crucial to watch how these executive orders are implemented in practice.
Okay.
Will they truly achieve the stated goal of efficiency? Or will they primarily serve to reshape the federal workforce along ideological lines?
Right.
We also need to pay attention to any legal challenges that arise. These sweeping changes are likely to face scrutiny in the courts, and the outcomes of those cases could have significant implications.
It feels like we're at a turning point. These executive orders are creating a ripple effect that could impact not just the federal workforce, but American society as a whole. This is definitely a story we'll be following closely. We've covered a lot of ground already, but I want to make sure we've captured the key takeaways for a listener before we move on.
Okay, so let's recap. The Trump administration has acted swiftly to dismantle DEI programs and personnel, target new hires for potential dismissal, focus on reshaping the IRS, and redefine sex in a way that's generating a lot of debate. All of this is being met with fierce opposition from unions and critics who view these actions as politically motivated and potentially harmful.
It's a whirlwind of activity, and this story is far from over. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder. What happens when an administration seeks to dismantle the very infrastructure designed to promote diversity and inclusion? What message does that send to the American people? What could be the long-term consequences of this shift, both within the government and beyond?
Those are excellent questions to consider.
Yeah.
This is a story with many layers, and we've only just begun to peel them back. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the potential implications of these executive orders in the next part of our deep dive.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting to think about the historical context here. This isn't the first time Trump has targeted DEI initiatives.
Right.
Back in 2020, during his first term, he issued a similar executive order prohibiting federal DEI programs.
He did.
So is this a continuation of a pattern we've seen before?
It certainly seems that way.
Yeah.
President Biden had taken steps to bolster racial equality and diversity in the federal workforce, so this feels like a clear swing back in the other direction. We're seeing a pendulum swing between administrations with vastly different approaches to diversity and inclusion in the federal government.
What do you think this back and forth means for the long-term stability of these programs? Can they be effective if they're constantly being overturned?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
This constant shifting of priorities can create instability and make it difficult to implement meaningful change. It also raises questions about the politicization of these issues, making it harder to build consensus and create lasting solutions. And we need to think beyond just the employees themselves.
Okay.
What about the everyday Americans who rely on the services provided by these federal agencies?
You're bringing up an important point. What could be the ripple effects for the public if these changes go through?
Well, let's take the IRS as an example.
Okay.
If it's significantly downsized, could that impact their ability to process tax returns efficiently?
Right.
Could it lead to longer wait times or fewer resources for taxpayers?
Yeah.
And what about those who rely on federal programs specifically designed to support underserved communities?
Right.
If those programs are scaled back or eliminated, what happens to the people who depend on them?
So even if someone isn't a federal employee, these changes could still impact their lives in a very real way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't just look at the immediate effects on the workforce. We have to consider the broader impact these executive orders could have on the public and the services they rely on. The real test will be in the implementation. We can speculate all we want, but ultimately we need to see how these changes play out in practice.
And we need to stay vigilant in holding the administration accountable for its actions and their consequences.
Right.
If the goal is truly efficiency, as they claim, then we should see measurable improvements in government operations.
Agreed.
If not, it raises questions about the real motivations behind these sweeping changes.
Absolutely.
Speaking of transparency, let's dive deeper into that executive order on sex and gender. You mentioned that health experts are raising concerns about the potential impact on individuals with diverse gender identities. What are their specific worries?
Well, there's a concern that this rigid definition of sex could lead to discrimination in access to healthcare services for transgender individuals.
Right.
And I'm also thinking about the potential impact on data collection and analysis. If gender identity is no longer recognized or tracked, how will that affect our understanding of health disparities and other important social issues?
It could definitely skew the data and make it harder to identify and address inequalities.
Right. The World Health Organization has cautioned against rigid gender norms, highlighting the potential harm they can cause to individuals with diverse gender identities. This move could have unintended consequences for a significant portion of the population.
So while the administration might try to frame this as a return to traditional values, it could actually set us back in terms of understanding and addressing the needs of all Americans. It feels like this whole situation is very reminiscent of Trump's first term. Remember the battles over immigration, healthcare, and environmental regulations?
Oh, yeah.
Are we heading into a repeat of those same conflicts?
It's certainly possible. Trump has made it clear that he intends to pursue an aggressive agenda.
Right.
And that's likely to generate strong opposition from those who disagree with his policies. We could be on the verge of another 4 years of intense political battles and deep divisions within the country.
And how do you think the Republican Party will navigate these issues? Will they present a united front in support of Trump's actions?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Or will we see internal divisions emerge?
Yeah.
That's a key question to watch. The Republican Party has gone through some changes in recent years.
Right.
And it's not clear how unified they will be in the face of these potentially controversial policies.
Yeah.
We may see some Republicans breaking with the party line, especially on issues like DEI and gender identity. It's almost like a political experiment unfolding in real time.
Interesting. Speaking of experiments, we've been focusing on the impact of these executive orders on the federal government. But what about the potential ripple effects beyond Washington, D.C.?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
These actions could have far-reaching consequences. The Trump administration has said they want to encourage the private sector to follow their lead on issues like DEI. Could we see similar rollbacks of diversity initiatives in corporations and businesses across the country?
Right. Could we see that?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
If the administration uses its influence to incentivize or pressure companies to align with its policies, we could see a chilling effect on DEI efforts in the private sector. And what about the legal implications? Could these executive orders set a precedent that weakens existing protections against discrimination in the workplace?
Those are important questions to consider. We've discussed the unions pushing back against these orders, but are there other groups or organizations preparing to challenge these actions?
Yes, we're seeing a range of groups mobilizing, including civil rights organizations, advocacy groups for marginalized communities, and legal defense funds.
Okay.
They're gearing up for what could be a long and challenging fight to protect the rights and interests of those most impacted by these executive orders. It feels like we're on the verge of a major clash of ideologies.
You said it. On one side, we have the Trump administration pushing for a smaller government, a more traditional view of gender and sex, and a rollback of DEI initiatives. And on the other side, we have a diverse coalition of groups advocating for social justice, equality, and inclusion. This battle has been simmering for years, and these executive orders seem to have brought it to a boiling point.
It's like a fault line running through the heart of American society. And these executive orders are shaking things up.
Yeah. Where do you think the American public stands on all of this? Are they aligned with the Trump administration's agenda, or is there a growing sense of unease and opposition?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Public opinion is often fluid and complex. It's difficult to gauge with certainty where the majority stands. But one thing is for sure, these issues are deeply personal and deeply divisive. It's like a fault line running through the heart of American society, and these executive orders are shaking things up.
It's a reminder that elections have consequences, and the choices we make as a nation can have a profound impact on the lives of millions. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive, exploring the historical context, the potential ripple effects, and the broader political and social implications of these executive orders.
Right. We've seen that these actions fit a larger pattern, and they raise significant concerns about fairness, equality, and the role of government in protecting the rights of all Americans. This is a complex and evolving story, and we'll continue to follow it closely. But for now, let's pause here and regroup before we move on to the final part of our depth dive.
Okay, so we're back for this final part of our deep dive into President Trump's executive orders and their impact on the federal workforce.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we've unpacked the immediate consequences, explored the potential long-term effects, and examined the wider political and social context.
We've been busy.
We have, and we've also seen that these actions aren't being met with silence.
No.
There's a lot of debate and pushback. Unions are mobilizing, civil rights groups are gearing up for legal challenges, and everyday Americans are voicing their concerns.
It's a big deal.
It is. So as we wrap up our deep dive, let's bring it back to you, our listener. What does all of this mean for you personally?
Well, if you're a federal employee, especially in a DEI role or a new hire, this situation is understandably unsettling.
Right.
Your job security is in question, and the future of your career path is uncertain.
And even if you're not directly impacted by these orders, it's still crucial to pay attention. These changes could ripple out, affecting the services you depend on, the programs that support your community, and even the fabric of American society as a whole.
It's interconnected.
It is. This is a time to stay informed, engage in constructive dialogue, and hold our leaders accountable for their actions.
Couldn't agree more.
We can't just sit back and passively observe these changes. We need to be active participants in shaping the future of our government and our nation.
Absolutely, your voice matters.
It does. Remember, a thriving democracy depends on engaged citizens. So speak up, share your thoughts, and make your voice heard.
There are so many ways to get involved.
There are.
Write to your representatives. Join organizations that resonate with your values and have conversations with your friends and family about these issues.
It starts with those conversations.
It does. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions. Ask tough questions and seek out different viewpoints. We need to be critical thinkers, not passive observers.
Yeah, the future of our nation hinges on that active engagement.
Well said. We've reached the end of our deep dive today. We've tackled complex and challenging issues, and it's clear there are no easy solutions.
No. But by engaging in thoughtful dialogue, staying informed, and taking action, we can all contribute to building a more just and equitable society.
We can, and that's what matters.
That is what matters. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back soon to explore more of the most pressing issues of our time.
Always more to discuss.
Until then, keep those wheels turning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep thinking, keep questioning, and let's continue this dialogue together.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.